Welcome back. Let me ask you something. Have you ever spent the whole day cleaning, but somehow it still feels like your house is a mess? You're not alone. Honestly, I think one of the biggest reasons this happens is because we clean, but then end up moving things around, piling them all into one spot, telling ourselves, I'll deal with that later. Sound familiar? I used to do that too, all the time. And to be clear, I'm not saying you're not trying. I know how much effort it takes. But today, I want to share some tips that actually help you solve these problems one by one clearly and completely. No more moving clutter from room to room. Let's deal with it properly and make the cleanup really count. And here's the best part: you don't need to clean everything in one exhausting day. Just break it up. One small area at a time. 5 minutes a day is more than enough if you do it right. All right, let's get started. Day 1 is start with the small wins. Have you ever noticed a small item in your home that just sits unused and forgotten about every day? An old bike rack, a broken garden hose, or those little things that seem insignificant but take up valuable space in your life? On the first day of my challenge, I decided to start with those small items. Nothing too big or complicated, but the kind of things that quietly weigh on your mind every time you see them. I looked around and thought, why not start with something simple like the garden tool area in the garage? Instantly, I found a broken hose and some other items I no longer needed. The solution I used was very simple. I asked myself one question: have I used this in the last 3-4 months, and will I use this in the future? And the result, 2 items removed in just a few minutes. The key to this method is its simplicity and consistency. You don't need to do everything at once, just a little bit each day, and every item you remove takes you one step closer to a cleaner, more peaceful space. After a week, you'll not only notice a difference in your surroundings, but you'll also feel a shift in your mood and energy. That's the power of starting with small steps. Now let's move on to the next day's challenge. By day 2. Instead of forcing myself to do something big or complex, I decided to something I was already planning to do, a task that was already on my to-do list. That day, I was meal planning for the week, so I figured it would be the perfect opportunity to also declutter my pantry while I was at it. I didn't need to carve out extra time. I was already going through my food stocks to make my shopping list. While looking through the pantry, I found a few things that had been sitting there forever. There were half-opened boxes of gluten-free mac and cheese. The kids refused to eat some leftover snacks that had expired, and a jar of spices that had been there for way too long. I decided to spend just a few minutes and toss out the things that were clearly not needed. The best part: it took less than 5 minutes. By the end of it, my pantry looked neater and I felt so much lighter. The hardest part was getting started. We often avoid these small decluttering tasks because they feel tedious. But in reality, when you combine these moments with your regular chores, it becomes easier to clear up space without much extra effort. Sometimes it's about doing what you already have to do, but with the added intention of simplifying your space. You'll be surprised how much lighter you feel after clearing out a few expired items or things that no longer serve you. If you're ready to take your decluttering to the next level, stay tuned for my next video. I decided to take on a much bigger challenge, one where I decluttered over 500 items in just 5 hours. Trust me, you'll want to see how that went and what I learned along the way. It was intense, but the results were pretty incredible. Subscribe so you don't miss out. Now back to today's content. On day 3, I was feeling more confident and decided to tackle something that wasn't working anymore. A shoe rack I had bought to keep the entryway organized. At the time, it seemed like a great idea, but after using it for a while, I realized it was just adding to the mess. The shoes never stayed where they were supposed to, and it ended up being more clutter than a solution. As a professional organizer, I know it can be hard to admit when something isn't working, especially when you've invested time or money into it. It's easy to think, maybe it will work better next time, or I don't want to waste what I spent on it. But sometimes we just need to face the fact that if something isn't helping, it's time to let it go. So I decided to sell the shoe rack. The process was simple. It took me less than 5 minutes to take a few pictures, write a short description, and post it online. The rack sold that week for the exact price I had paid for it. This experience reminded me that not everything works out as we hope, and that's okay. The key is to let go without guilt and move on to something that will serve us better. We often hold on to things just because we've committed to them, but in reality, they end up taking up valuable space and energy. By recognizing when something isn't working, we make room for better solutions, ones that actually improve our space and life. Now let's move on to the next day's challenge. On day 4, I decided to tackle an area in the house that I knew would immediately make me feel lighter: the office drawer. I'm someone who likes to keep everything organized, and this drawer had become the catch-all for papers, receipts, bills, and little items that I thought I might need one day. At first, this drawer worked really well for me, but over time it turned into a dumping ground with everything piled on top of each other, completely out of order. Every time I opened it, things would fall out, and I could never find what I was actually looking for. So I decided to give it a mini revolution. It only took about 5 minutes to pull everything out, sort it into piles, what I needed to keep, what I could toss, and what I could recycle. I found a ton of expired receipts, broken pens, and papers I didn't need anymore. In just a few minutes, I had a clean, organized drawer. And more importantly, I felt way less stressed every time I needed to find something in it. The systems we set up can be great at first, but sometimes they end up becoming the very thing that makes us feel cluttered. The key is recognizing when a system needs to be adjusted and not being afraid to change it. Now let's move on to the next day's challenge. By day 5, I was starting to feel the busyness of the week catch up with me. Between work errands and life in general, I knew I needed to tackle something I was already thinking about, something that didn't require too much mental effort. That's when I remembered the old cell phone I had sitting in a drawer. It had been there for weeks, waiting for me to make a decision. Should I sell it, or should I just recycle it? I'd been putting off the decision for a while because, to be honest, I'm not great with tech stuff. The idea of dealing with questions from buyers or figuring out the battery life seemed like too much. But I knew I couldn't just throw it away. I had checked, and old phones like this one still had value. So I took a few minutes, snapped a few pictures, wrote a simple description, and posted it on Facebook Marketplace. Within 24 hours, the phone was sold for $200. This quick win reminded me that when you declutter, sometimes the hardest part isn't the actual action, it's the decision-making. Once you make that decision, the rest is easy. And in this case, that small step not only cleared up space, but it also gave me a little extra cash to use for something fun. The lesson here is that when something's been on your mind for a while, don't overthink it. Just take action. Often the hardest part is just making the decision. Once you do, the clutter clears, and so does your mental space. Now let's move on to the next day's challenge. By day 6, honestly, I was tempted to skip the decluttering challenge for the day. But instead of avoiding it, I decided to face one of the bigger tasks I'd been putting off, something that had been sitting on my mind for weeks. I had a small pile of old paperwork, things like old bills, tax papers, and documents I hadn't had time to look through. Every time I passed that pile, I felt the weight of it, but I kept pushing it off because I didn't feel like dealing with it. The thought of sorting through all the papers just felt overwhelming. But today, I decided to tackle it head-on. I set a timer for 10 minutes, not too much time to feel stressed, but enough to get a real start. And in those 10 minutes, I made huge progress. I separated the documents into categories: things I needed to keep, things I could shred, and things I could recycle. By the end of the session, I had a much smaller pile of papers, and I felt a wave of relief. The key here was breaking down the task into smaller chunks and not letting it grow into something bigger. By starting with just 10 minutes, I got past the initial hesitation and saw how much I could get done in such a short amount of time. It's easy to get stuck thinking about the big tasks in our homes and feel overwhelmed, but when you dedicate just a little time to them, they suddenly don't seem so daunting. The result: a sense of accomplishment and a clutter-free space that feels a lot lighter. Now let's move on to the next day's challenge. It's the final day of my decluttering challenge. Life had been hectic, and I hadn't had the energy to dive into anything too big. So for day 7, I decided to embrace the idea of letting go of something that I had been holding on to without realizing it. I turned my attention to a box that had been sitting in the corner of my closet. It was filled with things I hadn't even opened in months, old books, random knickknacks, and clothes I no longer wore. Some of it I had kept just in case or because it had sentimental value. But over time, this box had become a symbol of unfinished business. Now the hard part wasn't sorting through it. The hard part was the emotional attachment. Letting go of sentimental things can be tricky. We hold on to them because we feel guilty or fear that we'll forget something important. The solution I found is giving yourself permission to let go without guilt. I spent about 15 minutes sifting through the box, sorting out what could be donated, recycled, or tossed. Instead of focusing on the memories attached to each item, I asked myself, does this still serve me? Does it still bring value to my life today? If the answer is no, then get rid of them. The result: a lot of emotional clutter was gone along with physical clutter. That box, which once felt like a burden, was empty, and that sense of freedom was honestly surprising. The biggest takeaway from this day is that decluttering emotional items is just as important as decluttering physical ones. It's about making space for what's truly meaningful, and that sometimes means letting go of things we no longer need, whether it's because they don't align with who we are now, or simply because they've been taking up mental space. All right, here's one of my favorite tips for staying organized. Set up a donation box and keep it in a place where you'll see it every day. You'd be surprised how much stuff you can clear out when you make it easy to get rid of things, little by little. The best part: you don't have to do a huge decluttering session, just toss in things you don't need whenever you come across them. Example: I've had a donation box in my closet for months now. Every time I go through my clothes, if I find something I haven't worn in a while or that just doesn't fit right, it goes straight into the box. No second guessing, no guilt, just letting go. Once the box is full, I take it to a local donation center. I love knowing my old stuff can help someone else, and it feels great to have that box sitting there helping me stay on top of things. This little habit helps me keep my closet organized and keeps the clutter from building up. Don't forget about your digital life. We all know how quickly our phones, computers, and emails can get overloaded with files, photos, and random stuff that just sits there, right? The thing is, it doesn't take much time to declutter your digital space, and the best part is once you do it, you feel a ton lighter, both physically and mentally. Example: I started setting aside 5 minutes a day to clean up my inbox. Honestly, it didn't feel like much, but after a few days of doing it, I couldn't believe how much calmer I felt. I unsubscribed from a bunch of email lists. I never look at deleted old messages, and organize the important ones into folders. Now when I open my email, it's not this overwhelming mess. Same thing with my phone. I deleted old pictures and apps I never use. These little daily habits add up, and before you know it, your digital space is as tidy as your physical one. Okay, here's a rule I swear by: the one in, one out rule. Every time you buy something new, you need to get rid of something old. This way, you're not constantly adding more stuff to your home, and you can actually keep the clutter in check. It helps prevent that feeling of your house getting overrun with random things you don't really need. Example: I've been using this rule for my wardrobe, and it really works. When I bought a new jacket last week, I immediately donated one that I hadn't worn in years. And let me tell you, it felt so good to let go of something that was just taking up space. You don't even realize how many things you're holding on to until you start following this rule. The great thing is, you don't have to feel bad about buying new things because you're keeping everything balanced by getting rid of something old. It's an easy way to keep your home feeling fresh and organized without any extra effort. And that's a wrap on this 7-day decluttering challenge. I'm honestly surprised by how much of a difference just a few minutes each day can make. It wasn't about perfection, it was about making consistent small changes that added up over time. If you've been thinking about decluttering but feel overwhelmed, I hope this shows you that you don't need to do it all at once. Little by little, you can create the space and peace you've been craving. But if you're ready to take your decluttering to the next level, stay tuned for my next video. I decided to take on a much bigger challenge one where I decluttered over 500 items in just 5 hours. Trust me, you'll want to see how that went and what I learned along the way. It was intense, but the results were pretty incredible. Subscribe so you don't miss out.